I was so looking forward to finally reaching Squab, 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 Squab. This has one of my all-time favourite 2.5 Men moments in it. You probably know which moment it is, but I'll talk about it in a little bit. And interestingly, not only does this have what I would think is my all-time favourite moment, but it's the top-rated episode on IMDb. It's the number 1 out of every 2.5 Men episode. So clearly, I'm not alone with those thoughts. This was the 23rd episode of the 2nd season, and of course, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about what happens in this episode. There are some really fantastic moments. It starts off with Alan asking Jake, or telling Jake, to tell Evelyn what he did on his spring break. And Charlie pretends that he saw something about a gardening expedition in the newspaper that was a bad idea. And he keeps saying it's a bad idea, and Alan is not picking up on this. I think it's clear to us, the viewer, that what Alan is encouraging Jake to do is a bad idea. And then this is confirmed when Jake tells Evelyn that he spent time with his maternal grandparents. And Evelyn is not happy about this. And then Alan realised what Charlie meant by a bad idea. After the intro theme, we are still on this. Evelyn is still ranting about how it's not fair. Charlie is passing these very dryly delivered comments. Really beautiful, very funny, very well written, great delivery. And Evelyn suggests that she has Jake over for dinner. And Alan doesn't think this is a good idea because he's concerned that Evelyn will mess Jake up, basically. So he tries to find an excuse, tries to blame Judith and the fact he needs to ask her permission, and he ends up phoning her, and that conversation went about the way anybody would expect it to. And the next thing we know, Alan, Charlie and Jake are coming back in the house. They've had a fantastic day out. They've bought Jake, well, Alan's bought Jake a load of stuff. Jake has been spoiled. He then hands him a $20 note and then immediately, as casually as possible, tells Jake he's spending the night at Evelyn's. And I thought that was quite interesting because initially Evelyn had just suggested having Jake over for dinner. Now he was going over there to spend the night. And Jake had the brilliant line where Jake said, "What do I get for doing it?" And Alan said, "I spent a fortune on you today." And Jake, without missing a beat, replies, "That was because you loved me, now you need me," which I thought was rather clever. And unfortunately, Jake is not winning this argument. Off they go to Grandma's house, and Jake is on the doorstep. Charlie and Alan ring the bell, and when Jake's back is turned, they scarper. They run. And this is the point when things start to get very funny. Evelyn opens the door, bends down to Jake's level. Jake's back is turned at the moment. He's looking in Alan and Charlie's wake. She says boo, which frightens Jake. Jake just so happens to be holding an ice cream, and he turns around and it gets smashed into Evelyn's face. Not a very clean day for Holland Taylor. She goes through quite a lot in this episode, and very much for our amusement. I very much appreciate that she went through all of this. It gets worse. It gets much worse. And obviously her performance throughout this was absolutely fantastic, as is Angus T. Jones, and I just think they work so well together. We do briefly cut to Alan and Charlie in a bar. They're reminiscing. Maybe reminiscing is too positive a word. They're reflecting on their childhoods and how much Evelyn screwed them over. They're about to realise they should go and collect Jake, but before they decide that that's the best thing to do, some girls wearing not a lot of clothing come in, and that plan is no longer in their minds. We do occasionally cut back to Charlie and Alan. I don't find those scenes that interesting, but it does allow us to have some really good pacing with the scene with Evelyn and Jake, because whenever we cut back to Evelyn and Jake, some time has passed, a couple of minutes, something like that. So I think that definitely helps with the pacing, even if the scenes at the bar were, to me at least, not that fascinating. So the rest of my thoughts are, until we get to the end, about Evelyn and Jake. And Evelyn catches Jake picking his nose. We have quite a lot of discussion about this. It's definitely the most in-depth discussion I've seen in a TV show about nose picking. And then comes the food. And Evelyn suggests sushi. And she puts some tuna on Jake's plate. And I'm with Jake on that one. That's not tuna. And he finally reluctantly tries it, immediately spits it out, and Evelyn basically squeals in disgust and tells him to get a drink rather than spitting it out of his mouth. So he drinks something from the table. It's wasabi. And it takes a couple of seconds for him to realise, and then the heat must have kicked in, and he starts licking a pillow. And Evelyn is telling him to not lick it, it's an expensive pillow, and then Jake's foot kicks the sushi tray, and it just goes flying everywhere, and it's a beautifully executed scene. Evelyn is on her hands and knees, scrubbing the carpet, and then she suggests squab. And Jake has a little sing-song about squab, and despite the fact that this is one of my favourite moments in it, well, the moment that's about to happen is one of my favourite moments in any sitcom ever, I only today learned what squab is, and honestly, no thank you. It is an immature domestic pigeon, under 4 weeks old, according to the internet. So I'd rather, I mean, I eat poultry, I eat chicken, and I don't really like turkey, but I will eat it. But there's something about that. There are a lot of pigeons in the UK, and just, no thank you. So I learned something today, I finally Googled it, finally got an education there, and I'm not interested in that at all. If anybody's tried it, please feel free to let me know what it tastes like, but I doubt I'd ever be willing to try it. I don't know, maybe a teeny tiny bit. If it ever comes up, I will put more thought into it. But there's my education for the day. And Jake doesn't want to try squab, he doesn't know what it is. So Evelyn suggests spaghetti. And we have a great exchange between them where she's suggesting types of spaghetti, and Jake responds, spaghetti, which I'm totally on board with as well. If I ask for spaghetti, I expect normal spaghetti. I'm not very culinary, needless to say. So she goes to do spaghetti, and a little while later she comes in with a plate of spaghetti, and this is the moment. This is the moment. I think it's this moment, and one moment towards the end. I think they're the reasons why this is the top rated episode on IMDb. Jake jumps up from behind the sofa, yells squab at Evelyn, and she doesn't just drop the plate, she flings the plate, and they play it in slow motion of the spaghetti flying through the air. It's almost like there was a magnet in the food, and they were using the magnet to perfectly carve out the path for this spaghetti. It was just so fluid, so perfect, and then it landed on Jake's head. And I don't know if the bit where it landed on Jake's head was a separate take and they dumped it directly on his head because it seems so perfect. I don't know. I don't know if there's any behind the scenes for this episode. I've just Googled it and nothing's come up, but I would love to see behind the scenes for this. And obviously it's just beautifully executed. So perfect. And eventually Alan and Charlie arrive to pick up Jake because they realise there is no way they can let him stay the night. And they walk in, Evelyn is on the sofa smoking. That's not something we see that often in sitcoms, and certainly sitcoms of this century. So that in itself is quite interesting. Usually when we see a character smoking in a sitcom, it's done in a way that doesn't make them look good. Clearly Evelyn is defeated, she's not feeling great, she's not feeling her best, she has had enough, and it's forced her to smoke a cigarette. And I think that they can get away with doing that because they're clearly saying this is somebody at the end of their tether. This is not somebody who's happy and cool. I think it's fair to say nobody wanted to be Evelyn in that moment. And Jake comes out and he's been in the bathroom, and a couple of seconds later, Evelyn looks up. There is a drip of water from above her head. And there we have the suggestion that Jake might have left the bathtub running. And then we have an amazing moment. And I have a teeny tiny problem with it, but I'm overthinking it. It's still pretty perfect. The next thing we know, this huge rush of water just falls down on top of Evelyn. And I do feel so sorry for Holland Taylor having to go through this episode, but it is absolutely fantastic. And Jake is kind of picked up and ushered out by Alan and Charlie. They kind of shove him out towards the door. And it's just absolutely fantastic. The only teeny tiny thing I have wrong with this, and I could be wrong about this, is that if the bath overflows, wouldn't the water continue to gush down? Rather than just coming down in one big stream and then stopping, wouldn't it continue? I am completely overthinking it. But I feel like, for accuracy, they should have kept it going just a little bit longer, and then maybe cut to the next scene while the water was still flowing. But I could be wrong. Thankfully, I've never been in that situation, so if somebody wants to tell me that actually that is how it would happen, I'm willing to believe it. And then we even have the stinger is not men, it's Squab, which I thought was a really nice touch. And then we end with Alan and Charlie discussing Jake, and then Jake pulling his own finger, and it's a fine way to end it. But this is just a phenomenally funny episode we have a lot of physical comedy, and we have a lot of brilliant dialogue, and the performances are all just absolutely fantastic. This has always been one of my favourite episodes, and the Squab moment is absolutely my favourite moment. And then when I saw that it was number 1 on IMDb, I wasn't surprised. And I'm pleased to know that other people really value this episode as well. And I'm just so happy that I finally got around to watching it again, because I am watching these chronologically, and when I saw this one was coming up, I was very, very excited. Squab, 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 Squab is absolutely amazing. Definitely one of the best 2.5 Men episodes ever.